let's get into it. What has been happening in 2023? Well, what has been happening in 2023 is that the world has gone, and a lot of people we work with have really embraced the go-to-market concept. And the reason this kind of came about was because, we spoke to a lot of managers, small managers, medium-sized managers, not so much, the BNP Paribas of the world. They've got this kind of almost sorted, but still debatable. And the one thing that most managers said is, we're creating a website. That's what we're doing. And we're producing some fact sheets, and we've got a designer involved. And as you kind of went into their project, their website project or fact sheet project was always running late. And when they built something out, it never really hit the mark from a engagement point of view, from a communication point of view. It all kind of failed the basic tests. And then we started working with managers, and we started helping them understand that, well, it's all well and good. You've got a website and you're doing some email marketing, but what it needs to fit into is a go-to-market plan. And what a go-to-market plan is essentially 5 steps. And the 5 steps are, built around, building out your narrative, building brand awareness, creating content, demand generation, distributing your content, creating and tracking engagements, and then building out your analytics from that. And hopefully that leads to investments. And because people were not underpinning, clients of ours and prospects of ours, we're not underpinning their marketing activities with these steps, these very, very defined steps. When they produced their website, which is kind of step 3, they hadn't got step 4 actually. They hadn't done steps 1, 2, and 3. And all they talked about was Google Analytics and my website, or they were talking about LinkedIn and Sales Navigator. The steps that really go to building a brand, even brand colors, building the narrative, what's the fund about, what's your attitude to risk, what's your investment strategy, all that kind of stuff had just not been built. So some people had kind of gone back in this last year and said, okay, let's start from, step 1, or some people just kind of carried on aimlessly, just building out their website, building out their content without really having a structure that sits behind this. Now, why this is really important, because once you've done steps 1 and 2, you're only left with 2 steps you have to do on a regular basis. And those are creating content and analyzing them. And that really is one of the big things that we've seen this year, how more and more people are investing internally and externally in creating brand awareness. So using companies like JPES, companies like MJ Hudson, which is Apex now, using people like Stacey Habner to create content. So content creation is really become quite high up on people that we're talking to. But at the same time, what kind of goes hand in hand is the ability to analyze that content, analyze who are the people you should be engaging with to raise assets. Now, the challenge with a go-to-market strategy is that if you're doing this every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, you're creating content, distributing it, analyzing it, you suddenly are sitting on a silo of data. And very, very quickly, you kind of run out of human capacity to kind of follow up on every inbound you've had. So what we then do is then, we kind of build out automations. So the automations that we see are basically, you take the analytics and you start to build out automations that sit behind that. So automations could be built around lead scoring. So has somebody been on the website X amount of times? Have they downloaded a fact sheet Y amount of times? What other components go in to then trigger either a call from a salesperson or an invitation to an event, or any other kind of marketing engagement that you can generate for them. So building out marketing automation essentially stops marketing teams and marketing people take all the good work that they've done in creating their brand narrative, their brand awareness, demand generation, all that stuff, to a point where you can actually start to filter out those that are not highly engaged, while those who are highly engaged, and then deliver that to the sales team. A question has actually come in, and the question is, what key metrics do you focus on when analyzing content? Well, again, that's different for different people. The most important part with content is how you tag it. So if you're using a system, WordPress, marketing automation tools, it's kind of tagging that content. So once you've tagged that content, it then becomes very easy to see which ones are being engaged with and which ones are not being engaged with. The next part of your question is, how do you then say, well, how do you derive ROI from this? And that's actually quite simple, but takes a bit of thinking. What you've effectively got to do, you've got to kind of look at this funnel that I'm showing you here and kind of say, okay, as people go through the funnel, how many of these people are converting into investments? So then you build a ratio to that. And what the ratio allows you to do is to say, right, if cost of creating this bit of content is, say, £10,000, £5,000 to £10,000 is roughly what content costs per unit generally. If it's well written, it's fund specific, including everybody's time, not just what you pay the copywriter. So everything in that, say £10,000, and then that you will distribute that to 100,000 people, or say 10,000 people, and of those 10,000 people, you'll get 10 that will leave some details behind, and then you'll then know is that from those 10, how many people will invest. So you'll have that number laid out, and let's say from that 10, you get 2 people who'd invest. So suddenly you've kind of built out your ratios. So let's say that ratio is 10,000 to 10 to 2. You then take the 2 and work out the lifetime value of that investor. You take that lifetime value of that investor and then divide it by the cost of that content, and that kind of gives you your ratio. And a successful ratio, which is what we call cost of acquisition to lifetime value, should be more than 8 to 1. So that's kind of the ratios you're looking at. So once you've kind of built that out, that's how you build these numbers to say, how is my content working? That's kind of the gold standard. It means that you need to be tracking everything internally. But other things people say is like, how much of this content has been downloaded? How long have people been on this content? How many unique new viewers have downloaded this content? There's a whole raft of kind of micro indicators that you can use to build out a model for this. However, the most accurate model is the lifetime value and cost of acquisition metric. So I hope that answered the question. Okay, so that is kind of what we're seeing broadly, is the kind of go-to-market strategy built around these 5 pillars, building out marketing automation and kind of delivering this information, delivering these automations and then pulling out people who are actively engaged as opposed to those who are not highly engaged. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to kind of take everyone through the 5 trends that we've seen over the last period of time. The previous conversation was really about the broad trends that we're seeing. People are getting more structured, people are getting more automated. But what we've been able to pull out is probably the 5 main areas where our successful and as well our failing clients, where they're doing well and where they're not doing amazingly. So the first part we're going to tackle is social. And in social, what we've actually found is that this has become the hidden gem of asset raising. And and people do, this is one of my most favorite slides, and I don't think a presentation goes without me sharing it, is that a lot of when people are starting their marketing journey, and as I said earlier on, website, Google Analytics, people start talking about running ads and doing SEO and working listing your funds on platforms and things like that. And invariably they are prone to failure because they are slow and hard to do, and they're still quick and hard to do. These are not easy things to do. And especially when you're running ads, as you know, you'd think running an ad campaign on, say, LinkedIn, or on a publication like Hedgeweek or Opalesque or any product like that, is an easy thing. It takes long-term commitment. And we're not just talking, we've just run one campaign. You've got to run at least 12 to 24 months worth of ad campaigns or SEO before you even get, a glimmer of the first, inflow into your fund. And if you remember, cost of acquisition, lifetime value, the amount you start paying out, it almost doesn't justify that. So coming back to what we're finding over the last 9 months is that LinkedIn and managers and biz dev guys and relationship managers, those guys who are raising assets, spending time with existing with existing investors and networking, that's absolutely where people are finding success, especially post-COVID. But social direct messaging on LinkedIn and having a really, really good social media strategy that's obviously signed off by compliance is really, really where people are finding huge amounts of benefit. Because if you think about email engagement, you're lucky if you're at 10 to 12 to 20% with cold emails. With if you send somebody a post, like actually FedEx something, it's 100%. But what kind of sits in the 40 to 70 range is social direct messaging. And as long as you've got that messaging correct, as long as that messaging is targeted and the people you're targeting is, in their interests, or it's incredibly, incredibly useful. And a really good resource about sending, LinkedIn messages is all available, on on Google, and lots of people have got lots of ideas. To me, and I've encouraged this to a lot of our customers, if you Google Chris Voss, and in the replay I'll send a link to Chris Voss. He's a guy who's an FBI negotiator, absolute animal when it comes to writing really simple social DMs to people. Another thing that clients are finding incredibly useful as well is the ability just to comment on other people's social posts, which again kind of builds up, your intellectual capital within LinkedIn. So that's definitely, do not underestimate the power of social media. And I do know it's been poo-pooed a little bit by people. Myself, I have a dedicated person just doing my social media. And I know it sounds a little bit crazy and a little egocentric, but we've actually used that channel ourselves, and it cannot be managed by me anymore. So how I started, I just got disciplined every morning and spent half an hour using Sales Navigator and using social DMs. Here we go. We've got another question, a few questions have come in. How do you think about the total cost of acquisition versus content expense? And related, do you consider corporate margins in your CLV? Absolutely. You've got to, you can have, the vanity metrics and the real metrics. Always go for what this campaign is costing you. Who are the people that are, cost per employee that's touching this? Absolutely, Andre. There's a modeling exercise that sits behind this that's more statistical and mathematical, but getting that number right, even the exercise of doing it, is highly, highly useful, because then you can actually work out your activation ratio, which is an activation ratio is how many people come in and download something that actually speak to a person within your organization. Is it possible to get a recording? Yes, it's all recorded to the cloud, and Rena, happy, and you'll get an email at the end of this. Okay, so that's social media. Nothing hugely revolutionary there, but as I said, the sweet spot is definitely social posting and commenting on social posting and social direct messaging. Okay, so that's kind of the social side. Now, AI, I know everyone's talking about ChatGPT, and I'm not going to bore anybody with that. But what I am going to talk you through is, the things that your AI should be doing. AI should be helping you to improve your customer engagement. It should improve your data analytics. It should be saving you time. And, with predictive analytics, it should be helping your sales team target people who you need to call. So what I've done is I've extended the power of PowerPoint, and I've embedded actual real live applications in here. So here's a really interesting one. So here is a system, our system, but other systems are available. And what we're doing here is we're using a little bit of AI and going into somebody's record and are actually working out the things that they are interested in based on their digital footprint. So obviously, when a salesperson goes in, and this is very much the traditional view, this person has been on these various digital channels, I'm going to have to read all of this. That's a lot to read and a lot to digest, and invariably it'll get ignored. So what we've done, what you can do is you can take this data, put it into an AI generator that generates that generates a word cloud, and basically you can then filter to say, okay, what information is Yvette interested in from the document she's downloaded? And it's actually telling you that she's actually interested in the commentary of these sets of funds, which is really interesting to have. It also gives you the ability to say, okay, over time, how engaged has this person been? So for a salesperson, it's making recommendations already within the CRM, so they can look at a record, they can actually see a summary of how engaged they've been over time, what content has piqued their interest. So it's not just a blind call. So having that data to hand and this word cloud being generated by an AI component is again a really clever use of AI that kind of goes unnoticed, but is worth having within your product, or within your CRM. If you don't use our platform, you can actually find word cloud AI tools on AWS that you can integrate with to pull this data out, and your CRM guys should be able to do this for you. Okay, the other thing what AI should be able to do is kind of look at your content, the content of emails you're sending out, the content of posts you're putting out, and be able to suggest whether or not they are going to get engaged with, or predict, are there any things in what you produce that are kind of red flags? And so what AI is able to do is it can do content analysis. And what it's able to do is kind of look at your content, work out from previous campaigns what's worked and what's not worked, and then do analysis around text, around links, around typography that you're using, and then suggest whether you're following best practices or not. And this is available. I mean, this is not commonly available, and you can build it using AWS or Azure's content AI tool. It's baked into what we do, but again, this is just demonstrating how people have gone this year away from, well, it kind of looks okay, it passed compliance, to actually really looking at the text, the call to actions, the typography within the email, because now you're able to get that detailed and go into that minutiae in the content you're creating. You've also got the ability, using AI to do compliance checks on what you're sending out. And that's really useful because, especially in a regulated world that we live in, making sure that your content passes compliance on the critical path. And so that's why if you use a semantical analyzer and give it rules, which is kind of the reverse of ChatGPT, you're able to then generate alerts to say whether your content is going to be compliant or your content's not compliant. So this again is real world usages of AI, and I know everyone's thinking about ChatGPT, and I keep going on about that, but there's lots available that are not as content generation focused, more actually kind of built into your day-to-day routines. That's not really sold as AI, but is AI, and if you're not doing it, it should be built into your kind of marketing processes. If not now, then at least in the next 12 to 18 months. So the other part of AI is around data visualization and trending. And what this does is, this is actually an interesting LTV exercise we ran, is, marketing inflows versus, marketing activity versus inflows into the fund. And, working out the correlation is that, well, guess what? They correlate identically with a bit of lag. So, which is, if there's ever proof you need to spend money on marketing, that's your AI should basically be telling you that. And you can build that out in our tool, Power BI, Tableau, all these things. But as I said earlier on, this is, you can't build this out unless you've got all those steps lined up and that you're not doing it on a regular basis. And the next part to AI is marketing automation with AI. And what that should allow you to do is, when you are building out your automations, is not to have every step rigid to say, well, if this happens, do this. Is being able to branch out your automations to say, if this branch has more success than another branch, then that's the branch to go after. So that's really, really, really critical to do. Most tools don't have that to hand. They are catching up. The other thing to look at as well is making sure that you're sending your communications in the right time zone and not on a holiday or anything like that. Again, is that AI? It's debatable, but actually having that small level of intelligence, it may not be artificial, it just may be common sense, but having that built in is really, really important in your automations as well. And finally, the most important part of AI is really behavioral analytics, and really understanding the people who are engaging with you and across multiple channels, connecting them up to investor databases, so you actually know not only their digital footprint across your marketing landscape, investor portal, website, social, email, but also knowing what are they investing in, and putting those two together is the ultimate in the Venn diagram of asset raising and digital marketing. And when you put that together, is then making that available to the sales team so they can actually go into a contact within your CRM and say, click on someone like Yvette, and actually see that screen I showed you earlier on, where you actually know what digital insights they're working with, where they're accessing content from, and how engaged they've been. So right, just bear with me a second. I'm going to go back to that slide. There we go. So having that to hand is the culmination of the AI and marketing journey, having this available. And you can build this out in whatever tool you want. In our product, you can build this in Excel should you feel like it. Doesn't matter what you use, you've got to have those building blocks in place. And if there's anything we take away from this, is that the big trend is people building out their marketing around brand awareness, demand generation, narrative. That's the big takeaway, and then feeding their digital marketing that sits on top of that. Okay, so that's AI. Marketing automation, as I just take a quick look at the time, right, we're pretty much on time. Marketing automation is where there is not a client of ours that is not using marketing automation in some way. And it really is about building out the various steps of when somebody you don't know engages with you, how do you push them down the funnel to get them to a behavior that means you can call them up. And whether that means a sequence of emails, whether it means a sequence of emails, an invitation to an event, whatever that looks like, is being able to map that out and then have the ability to automate that process. And where, again, this is really, really useful is that if you've got a 12-month content plan, and each month generates 100 new leads, within 12 months, you'll be losing people. And what marketing automation really does, it really stirs the pot, and really then we're using the lead deck, the AI I showed you earlier on, surfaces those people to the top. So your sales team will have better conversations and make better connections. And that's how this all ties in. It's not all about, blasting people with irrelevant emails. It really is about, gaining an understanding of the people you need to reach out to. And if they're not ready yet, how do you kind of move them along? So that's kind of the automation side. What kind of sits behind automation is the concept of lead scoring. And lead scoring is basically having the ability to know and weight people's, giving different people's behaviors different weights, and then feeding that into the automations, feeding that into the reporting, and then feeding that ultimately into the AI. This again is a thing that what people have kind of ignored for, say, 2021, 22 onwards, has definitely been, traction has definitely been building up on this. So those three things, you can't do AI without the automation, you can't do automation without the lead scoring. So a lot of this is not your software that you use, it's all about your marketing approach, your marketing mindset. And I always send out on Monday mornings, I don't know if anyone of you guys follow me on LinkedIn, is hashtag Monday marketing and marketing motivation, because you do need to be motivated. This is a lot of discipline goes into getting this right. So yeah, if you're losing people in your marketing team, hold on to them, because marketing is a core business function in a fund. So, another question's come in. How do you integrate product data with CRMs in which, so when you mean product data, that's probably not clear, Andre. Maybe at the end you can just I can answer that for you if you can ping me some bit more detail. Okay, so that's nurture, insights, automation, content. So the last webinar we ran was all about content, and the summary of that really boiled down into create content, create blogs, create investment strategy, run webinars, create thought leadership pieces. And the best way that was discussed last week that people are slowly getting on the bandwagon is effectively record on a dictaphone. I say dictaphone, I give my age away, on one of these devices, but by a portfolio manager or by somebody involved in the fund, by your CIO, and then basically give that to a copywriter, specialist copywriter, and get them to create blogs and thought leadership papers and run webinars on the back of that. Once you've done that, you've now got a body of content, and you can then snip that up into video, long form and short form. Once you've done that from one piece of content, you can then distribute that content on social, on webinars, on market updates, and email campaigns. And then that can then feed right back into your CRM, into your automations, into what I spoke about earlier on. So, obviously content creation, brand awareness is a challenge in itself. And so many people fall down at the hurdle of actually spending every month creating content, because there are lots of stages to it. You can't just walk up to a PM and say, spill me your guts about, this strategy or your macro, your global macro view on this. So it is really about catching the content in a format, getting somebody to kind of write it all out, transcribe it, create different forms of content, distribute it, and then put it into your CRM and your reporting tools and your automations. So this is really kind of how you go about kind of the content creation. If you go back to the last webinar we ran, it's there in all technicolor detail. And ultimately, it's basically taking one bit of content and just repurposing it. And that really seems to be now the trend that those who have kind of embraced content generation are not creating content once, distributing it on one channel. They're kind of distributing it on multiple channels in the appropriate form. So that's content. And finally, and you do say the most important thing you leave till the end is investors. And a real big trend is creating, much sharper, much better investor communications. And the reason for this trend now is because I think, as if you go back, that's the slide I showed you earlier on, which I'll quickly jump back to my favorite slide, which is this one. It's basically you're targeting existing investors. So if you want to target existing investors, whatever brand you have, you want to make sure it is absolutely on point. So that's why we are seeing a lot of our customers investing a lot of time and energy in getting their emails to look absolutely brand centric. So that's a really important part of a trend that we're seeing with investor comms. And if all the things I've kind of done today, this is probably the easiest thing to implement, providing you've got the tools to do this. So so that's one part that we're seeing. The other part has been how many clients have actually started now building out investor portals. Here's an example. We don't do investor portals. Dynamo do investor portals. Other products are available that do investor portals. But what it's really doing, it is making that relationship, which was originally all about performance with the investor, actually getting the investors to actually work closer and be closer and closer to the fund and the brand. And that's because there's a real change in thinking where, the change has been coming, I think, probably, as a fund matures in their 5th, 6th, 7th year, where people pivot, and they pivot around, it's not all about performance. It is actually about attitude to risk and investor strategy, and how, investors are being treated by the fund, whether consciously or subconsciously, and having a really, good brand, making content easily making, people's holdings that much more easier to navigate, and also making this content available in their investors' own portfolio tools is again a huge benefit. So we're really kind of seeing that there's a real trend towards making the investor's life that much more easy. And again, who is the easiest person to sell to, right? Somebody who's already invested in you previously. So those are the trends that kind of we've seen over the last period of time. Social, AI, automation, content, and taking care of investors. So that's it. We are at 36 past the hour, wherever you are in the world. Got a whole raft of questions coming in. Again, thank you all very much for your time. I will aim to answer these questions. How do you integrate product data? So Andre, here we go. Sarah says, the biggest challenge I've heard investor portals is adoption while still upholding white glove service standard. If someone has 30 managers, do they want to remember? No, Sarah, that's a really good point, and I literally just touched on this. So there are products out there, and I will send you a link. It's kind of around the open banking API, where you can send investor portal type information to a single aggregator. And I believe, I won't make a guess, but there are products out there that allow you to do that. The other thing as well, sometimes, you know, the fact that you offer an investor portal is almost enough. And it's one of those things, right, is that, you know, of all your investors, Sarah, how many people are actually going to go to your investor portal? But the ones that do, you've got to make sure you care for them. So it really is a balance there. From the analysis we've got, because we also track investor portals, one of the least used features is investor portals. Investors prefer information in email, and the reason they prefer an email because they can categorize the data themselves. And there's a whole exercise, and it was really fascinating to actually see this happen, is how they get their emails and they just categorize it. So they know at any one point, if they want to see their performance, they're just looking at the PDF. And that's why, but some are tech savvy and some of them don't have, you know, they're not invested in 30 funds, and they can just log into one or two and they're quite happy with that. So it's almost like with the investor side, you've got to make the emails look really brand centric, but at the same time have an investor portal that gives people that option. So you are not going to get to that stage. I'm convinced that all your investors go to the investor portal, because that's just reverse. That'll just annoy people. Okay, so I hope that helps, Sarah. Kathleen, what are the best practice for products specific 15 minutes pre-recorded, be live? Are you talking about funds, or are you talking? That's not quite clear. It depends on interest, right? So we've lost this webinar. We've probably lost 10 people, which is fine. Which is about, you know, 10% of the people that started. So unknown. It's all in the feedback you get over time. Okay. Okay, here we go. In your content ROI model, can you share the rationale for the 8-to-1 ratio as being good? I don't know that ratio. I got that ratio from somebody else. They are a master. They run I'd like to think about a 45 billion fund, and that's the number they told me. And hey, I'm not one to argue. It feels about right. It's one of those numbers. It feels about right, and it's a good benchmark to start. Somebody says, great stuff, you're going to make me look good. Thank you for the information. Okay. Slides are available, as we will when I send out the replay. Questions come through. How do you integrate product data with the CRM in which salespeople live? You can do it by APIs. So at one level, if you've got programmers, they can do it in APIs. If you know a little bit more, you can use products like Zapier and MuleSoft. If you don't have a team to do this, that's kind of where our product fits in. Or you can just pump that data into Excel and do a few pivot tables and off you go. So it really depends on how you're set up, Andre. Okay, so right. Question, here we go. Question on ChatGPT. What are the best prompts to use on ChatGPT? I'll tell you the prompts that I've used recently. I said, one of my clients said, we are a fund and we have a long-short strategy. We have a long-only strategy. Please generate for me 15 LinkedIn posts that show expertise in the field, and keep it to, and make sure they're not too long. It's amazing what it came out with. Had all the right grammar, but was not specific enough for that fund. And because it was quite generic, it didn't really have the essence of what that fund was all about. So, you know, ChatGPT, I use it sometimes when I've got a bit of a brain freeze when I'm trying to do my own LinkedIn post. But it's a little bit like when you look at something generated by AI in the human form, just doesn't kind of sit right. And it's a little bit like Post Malone, who's a musician. Post Malone, you know, was talking about how some of his music has been generated by AI and sounds actually really, really good. But the trouble is that you're not, it's a, you know, and with any kind of relationship, it's more people are connecting with Post Malone because they're going to see him in concert. They kind of, it's the essence, not how something sounds or how something reads, it's the connection you make. And it's kind of AI and ChatGPT. I mean, you know, ChatGPT right now is like Netscape version 1.0. It's like the very first dawning of the internet and what people could do with it. But the really interesting thing is, you know, while we're kind of fixated on how clever the content is, it is clever, but is it relevant to your fund? I think what really needs to be, ChatGPT needs to be able to do, or any kind of, you know, generative AI, is look at your body of work and then create. You look at your content and then create in your voice. And I think that's a way to go. But then if somebody was to quiz you about it, you know, you wouldn't know because you haven't generated it. So the connection breaks. So, you know, my own views on ChatGPT is a little bit like Dharmesh Mysteries. It's that it is very much Netscape 1.0, and there's a way to go, but still pretty useful in the you know, like in a kind of Alta Vista kind of way. So that's kind of there. I'm just checking if there's any more questions. No. Well, thank you all very much once again for being generous and keeping me motivated to keep running these webinars. Our next webinar will be on template creation. So I will be actually, we'll hopefully be speaking to the same person that generated these templates. So once again, thank you all for your time. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye for now.